Welcome to Delight in the Limelight. Today we're talking about comedy and humor and bringing the funny into your speaking. And I have as my guest Blake Green to help us out. Blake is an actor, a stand up comedian, and award winning radio personality, as well as short film director. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Linda, thank you for having me. It's great to be here on the show.
So, one of the things that we had a chat earlier, and one of the things that I was really struck by was your early experiences of humor. And can you talk to us about what it was like, being a kid growing up with a
Absolutely.
funny bone?
You know, uh, uh, when I was growing up, what was something that was really important to me was to be able to make my dad laugh or my grandfather. I had a lot of humor in my family, and like anytime I could make my dad or my grandfather laugh really hard, like that was a good day for me. And so, just little things would happen. Like if something happened between me and my brother, or if something happened at school, I would like run home and tell them about it and try to get them to laugh. And that would make my day if I could land the laugh, because I knew that they knew what was funny, and if they laughed at what I did, that meant I was funny.
So did you feel like it was like it gave you a sense of importance and value that they would laugh, at your stories? Or was it also just that you wanted to share the joy?
Would definitely wanted to share the joy, but yeah, it was kind of like what I feel now as a stand up comedian. Like, if the audience laughs, it's kind of a reassurance that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Like if I made them laugh, it just made me feel good. Um,
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's something about laughter. It's almost like the pinnacle, of our human existence. Wouldn't you say it's one of the pinnacles?
it's
Of course.
It definitely makes every day a little easier if you can get some laughter in there, I think.
Yeah, it's almost like having the laughter in kind of brings in more oxygen and it kind of expands our body, it relaxes us. And I've
Absolutely.
also I've also heard, I've taken a lot of speaker training, and a lot of speaker coaches have said that if you can get people to laugh, then they're more ready to learn.
Yes.
And I think that is one of the reasons why, I'm very interested in bringing you on. And also because I know personally that when I listen to a speaker, or, I'm sitting in a meeting or whatever, that when there is some humor, it just makes it, I mean, it's more fun, right?
Makes the meeting
And
go by
it
faster,
makes the
makes it you
meeting go
kinda get
by
a little
fast.
more out of it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like,
definitely.
"Okay, I like this. I like this." And so I feel like the more that we can bring humor into our lives, whether it's in our, as you did, in your family relationships, or, with our friends, or with our colleagues through work or our speaking, I think the better our life is gonna feel. It's gonna be more
Absolutely.
delightful, one of
More
the
than
words.
like for sure, for sure. And, it just takes away some of the mundaneness, like, if you're at work and it's just kind of a regular day, if you can inject some humor into the day, that's it really helps the day, I think.
Yeah, well, we'll circle back to that later because I do wanna look into a little bit more on, how do we bring humor into the workplace.
Okay.
But I wanna start or go next to you've shared with me how, and I'm sure this happens inevitably to anyone who's a stand-up comedian, bombing on stage. Like,
Yes.
ha has that happened to you?
Many times. Many times. So there's sometimes where you have something that you are sure is gonna make them laugh. You have spent a lot of time on it, and you go up there and it tanks, and that's just part of it. It's kind of part of the process of making a joke that works. Is sometimes you have to start in a place where it doesn't really work, and see what's wrong with it, and kind of play with it, toy around with it. Um, it's not really fun to bomb. It can be, you can make it kind of fun. Um, I think the best way to deal with it is just to use a little bit of kind of self-deprecating humor uh, to get out of it. Like recently, I was in a coffee shop and I was trying to get ready for a show in Atlanta, and I actually mentioned on the microphone when I was doing at the coffee shop. I was like, hey, these are some jokes that I'm going to be doing in Atlanta. And so I just want to try them out on you guys. And so I did one and it just completely tanked. And I was like, well, there's an example of a joke that I will not be telling in Atlanta. Just kind of, after a while, you kind of build up little kind of techniques you can use to move the show forward, even if it's not the best show. You can make the audience comfortable.
Mhm. Can you give us a few examples? I mean, I really like that one. In the coffee shop, was it like an open mic coffee shop or
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
so because I was thinking, were you just, like, using the mic that they usually say,
Oh.
"Blake, your coffee's ready."
Oh, yeah, any microphone I can get. But yeah, I'll go to the town hall meeting and steal their microphone. No, yeah, it was an open mic at a coffee shop. There's one where I live that they do a few open mics every week, and that's really the best place to buy brand new material as an open mic night. Now, if it was like a paid show, I would stay away from like brand new jokes. You want to, if it's anytime it's your book to do a show, you want to do your absolute best, most polished material. Um, but yeah, open comedy, open mic night. That's where anyone can sign up, and it's a lot of fun. Like if you've never done it, I definitely recommend it. You find a local open mic night in your town, write some jokes that you think are funny, and go up there. You don't even have to write. You can take a joke book up there and just read some jokes from a joke book just to get the feel of it.
I'm thinking I've never done that. I remember the first time I went to a story slam, and I had never been to one before. I didn't know what it was about, and it was someone who invited me who I'm trying to think, it was a professional connection, and she said, "I run this story slam." So I came and she welcomed me when I came through the door, and she said, "Are you gonna tell a story?" I said, "No, I'm just gonna check out what it's all about."
Mhm.
And when I sat there, she said, "Well, you can put your name in the hat anytime during the evening."
Okay.
So I was sitting there and people got up there and it was like they started from nowhere, they went to nowhere, and sometimes it was kind of interesting, but
Uh huh.
kind of just as you said that it could be your total first draft and it's okay. And
Right.
I thought to myself, "Wow, the bar is really low here. I can do this." And the other thing is that there was a theme, which was say a little prayer. And I was
Okay.
thinking, I don't relate to that. I don't like pray, in my spirituality, or maybe I do, but it didn't no story came to mind. But
Okay.
after I had the thought of, "I can do this," a thought came to my mind of when my mother stole a Mercedes Benz.
Okay.
And it was during a time I was praying to get her off the road. So I like jumped up, I put my name in the hat, and I said, I'm just gonna do this." And so I think, when I hear you say, just go to an open mic and, tell some jokes. I mean, my first reaction is horror. Like, I could never do that without, like, I don't know, a lot of preparation.
Mhm.
But then when I remember the storytelling slam and how kind people were, really. I mean, it wasn't like people were throwing tomatoes at the speakers. No, it was actually a very supportive environment. And I think that I might recommend doing what I did is just go to an open mic.
Yeah. That's definitely probably the better way to start. Just go to one and just sit in and watch. And usually that is the situation. There's very supportive comedians there, and but if you get up there and say, "Hey, this is my first time doing comedy," people are going to be especially more supportive. And so uh, a lot of times there's many different ones. So you might find one that's a little bit smaller, a little more intimate, like in a coffee shop. Some of them you'll find larger, but I would, I still love to go and do my open mic at the coffee shop. It's just fun. It's practice. It's saying your jokes for the first time, looking around at the faces and seeing how the faces are reacting to what you're saying. and it's a little less pressure than like a bigger audience.
I would say a lot less pressure, not a little less pressure. I mean, because what it sounds like to me is like you can bring your like in most things in art or writing a book or whatever, we talk about write the sucky first draft.
Right.
So it's almost as if you can say, okay, I'm just going to write my sucky first joke
Right.
and I'm going to bring it
Yeah.
because that's where you bring your sucky first jokes. And that's what everyone's doing. Everyone's there doing the same thing.
Yes.
And I think that's it's almost like you've got to take a first step
Hmm.
in order to take the next one. You can't take the second step after until you've taken your first one.
And I kind of feel the more you own it, like the better. Like even if it is some of the worst jokes do the best if you just kill it, you own it. You know what I mean? But I want to
Mm.
hear your story about your mother stealing the Mercedes. I want to hear that.
Well, the funny thing was I kind of said deprecatingly, people started where they didn't know and they ended and they didn't know. And I felt the same way. I got up there and I thought, I don't know where even to get into the story. But and it's a 5-minute story, so I don't want to tell the whole story, but I do have it up on YouTube.
Okay.
I think it's called Mother Trouble. And it's under, if you said Linda Ugalo, Mother Trouble, you'll find it. So I actually won the first place in this. I didn't even know it was a
Nice.
competition. I had no
Nice.
idea it was a competition, but I won a $25 gift certificate for the bookstore we were in. And then
Great. Yeah.
I needed to go to the semifinals. I was like, "What? I've got to do this again." So I actually hired a storytelling coach to help me shape the story better. And
Wow.
I did win at the semifinals and I went on to the finals, which was a stage with, several hundred people in the audience, and I did not win the finals, but it was a wonderful experience, and it was wonderful to be able to shape some of that story. Okay, so my mother had dementia, but
Okay.
we weren't sure. It's kind of like when people start to have dementia, we're not quite sure.
Right.
And
Right.
she was still quite capable, and she drove up to I mean, she flew up to New York from Florida, where she spent the winters, to, I think, her grandson had just had a baby. So
Okay.
she came up for we're a Jewish family, she came up for the bris, which is the circumcision. That's like a few days after the baby's born.
Right.
So she comes up and she rents a car and she decides to go visit her great grandson in the hospital. So, and she told me she was going to do this. So later I spoke to her and I said, "How did you see, I can't remember. What did you see the baby?" And she said, "No, I never got to see the baby." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I couldn't find them." I said, and I'm thinking, "Do you know their last name?" And of course I know, and she's like very defensive.
Uh huh.
The next day my sister calls and she said, you're going to think this is really strange, but mom is talking about how much she loves Enterprise Rent-A-Car because they gave her a Mercedes Benz. And I told her, "Mom, you don't have a Mercedes Benz. They don't rent out Mercedes Benz." She said, "I'm telling you, I have a wonderful Mercedes Benz." And then the next day, my sister calls again. She said, "People at the club are telling me that mom's saying this, and I went to the hairdresser and people are calling me and I don't know what's going on." And my sister didn't like my mom, so she didn't want to like go visit her. So the day of the bris came,
Hmm.
a friend of my sister's was going to pick up my mom at the Enterprise. So my sister calls her friend and she said, "Has my mom arrived yet?" And the friend says, "No." And wait, here she comes. Here she comes. And my sister said, "Tell me, what car is she driving? What kind of a car?" And she said, "It's a Mercedes Benz."
Wow.
So the guy comes out of the Enterprise and he says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, that this isn't our car." And she says, "Well, I have to run to New York for my grandson's bris or great grandson's bris. You take care of it." And she locks the car and takes the key with her. So my sister is like, "Oh my God, what do we do here?" So she called the police and um no, she calls back the Enterprise and she said, "Can you break into the car and find out whose car it is?" And they said, "Well, we don't wanna get your mother in trouble." She said, "We wanna get my mother in trouble, so she doesn't drive anymore." Anyway, it
Oh my
turns
goodness.
out she stole the car from the hospital garage. She
Oh
just
my goodness.
she got into what she thought was a nice looking car, and she drove it away. And when my sister called the garage, they were like, because she said, "I have information on this stolen car." They said, "What do you know?" And they said in 25 years with this valet system, they've never had this problem before. They figured that she was some kind of a seasoned thief.
Wow. So does the story end with her going to jail or
No, unfortunate like, my sister told the police to let the family know
yeah.
that if they wanted to press charges, they were welcome, but they didn't.
That's great that they were kind of understanding of the situation. And it's cool that your mom got to drive the Mercedes for a little while. You know, that's yeah.
I didn't think of that. But yes,
She got
yes.
the cool experience of driving the cool car. You know, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The story that I told at the slam stopped, a little bit, a little I ended it somehow, but the actual story does continue on. There's several chapters of us getting her off the road, and I would pray at night, "Please, please get her off the road without anybody getting hurt."
Right. Stories are great. That's a great way to get started. I have a funny story that I've been meaning to tell about the time that I fell through my ceiling in my house. Um, and so I've been wanting to do that at an open mic night. But the story is very simple. It's just I went up to the attic, and I didn't have a particular reason to be up there. It was an unfinished attic, and I went up there just to kind of look around. We'd been in the house for a few months, and I could see in the very back of the attic there was like this bucket sitting there, and I'm like, I wonder if there's something in that bucket. Is it like my brain is telling me there's a severed head in that bucket, and I have to see it. I have to see it so I can, notify the authorities or something. That's the nightmare that's in my head. And I'm like, I'm just out of curiosity. I want to see what's in that bucket. And so I just kind of had to kind of carefully step. It was an unfinished attic, like vacation, Christmas vacation. Remember Clark Griswold when he like fell through? It's kind of that. It was kind of that same situation. Um, so I just had to kind of carefully step across. I got to the end. I could see that the bucket was completely empty to my disappointment. And then I was like, okay, well, it's time to go back down. And so I started carefully walking across, and then all of a sudden slipped, and I had one leg go completely through the ceiling. And then I just immediately started flipping out. I was like sweating and I was like panicking. And so I was able to pull myself back up, and I took two more steps, and then I fell through again in a different spot. And I have cats and dogs, and so I'm sure they were just terrified seeing my legs dangling from the ceiling. So after I was able to get myself out of the attic, and I came back down, and there was just that kind of, I don't even know kind of the puffy stuff. The oh, this is gonna make me sound so dumb.
Insulation.
Insulation, yes. The insulation was like all over the floor in my house. And the worst part of the story was that after this happened, my wife was at work, and I had to call my wife and say, "Hey, I fell through the ceiling in two different spots." And so for like I think 2 or 3 days, we just had these gaping holes in the ceiling. Like I'm sitting there watching TV, and then I see the holes in the ceiling. And we finally had a guy come out and fix it, and he made it look brand new, like nothing had happened.
Yeah, it's
But
amazing.
I will
Yeah.
forever have that memory. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So tell me, Blake, what are some of the things or the elements that you will bring to that story to make it into a funny thing?
anything that can be exaggerated is good. Anytime you can bring some level of hyperbole to the situation, like if you can take something that actually happened, and like just a moment ago when I said that my legs were dangling like that and freaking out my cats, that's maybe not the most true part but probably the funniest part of the story right there is just me hanging with my legs dangling. Um, so I mean, I think anyway you can, if you can use more like intense words or more just use some kind of unreal comparison to make it seem so far fetched that makes it funnier to me.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, the truth is really a lot of times the funniest thing. If you can find some way to just tell the truthful story and make it funny, but I I do feel that uh, the phonier the funnier sometimes. So it kind of goes both ways. If you tell a
Yeah.
true story, that's funny, or if it's
Yeah.
a completely made up story, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that came to my mind was I mean, the question was, were you alone? Who was in the house? And then you said the cats and dogs, and I was wondering, oh, are they like are they trying to like talk to you or who or talk to this thing that emerged from the ceiling?
They had to be freaked out. See, just that alarming sound, and then seeing two legs from the ceiling. I feel like if I was a cat, I'd be scared. You
Uh-huh.
know,
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's funny. That's funny. I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking also maybe if a cat could jump up on something and kind of bat the foot.
yeah, I'm just a toy to them. I'm just a
Right.
little. But yeah, like anything you can do to exaggerate a story to make it funnier is what I would go with.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Yeah, 'cause I know, we were supposed to record this earlier, and I
mm,
had a shoulder injury. Similarly, kind of like to the story that you're telling,
right.
I tried to get into a hammock and it flipped me out, and I landed on my shoulder and I injured my shoulder, but I at the same time, even though I was stunned and I couldn't speak and I couldn't move, I thought it was hysterical that of all things, I was trying to get into a hammock to relax, and here I was with an injured shoulder.
You do not know how to relax, Miss Linda. You can't relax for a minute. Um, yeah, so that's a great story. That's a great premise to talk about, and it's one that people definitely sympathize with hearing that story. Nobody wants to lay in a hammock and then all of a sudden slip and break the shoulder, hurt the shoulder, you know. And so I think it's definitely it's relatable because it's like, wow, I can't even get a minute to relax without having some sort of incident,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, it was pretty funny to me. I mean, I'm glad that inside myself I could see the humor because, like, here I was at a conference, I was in a hotel, I had to leave on a plane the next day. I couldn't even take off my shirt because I couldn't lift up my arm. So I was like, how to take off a t-shirt with one arm is challenging to say the least, or brushing my teeth with the left hand and having to pack my suitcase with one arm and, like, and just like, how am I even gonna, like, walk through the airport, and it was just it just felt like a comedy
There's
experience.
something funny about falling down, like, and it's terrible. It's a terrible thing, like when it happens to you, but like later, like looking back on it, it's funny to think about because you see the picture in your head. I remember one time, yeah, I mentioned I was a radio personality. I used to work at a radio station, and I remember I was wearing cowboy boots. Okay, I live in Alabama. I had some cowboy boots on, and it was a rainy day, kind of a heavy rainy day, and your story made me think about it. That I was completely alone at the radio station one day, and it's like that a lot on the weekends. Like you might be the only person in the radio station, and so it was like the end of my shift, and I was walking out, and I left. I had my cowboy boots on, and I slipped in some water, and my feet came out from under me like a cartoon character, like something you'd see on Tom and Jerry. Just feet went like above my head, and I hit the ground hard. And I just immediately the worst part of it to me was not the pain of falling; it was the embarrassment of falling. Did anybody see what just happened? I hope not. please, nobody. I hope nobody saw that, and luckily nobody did, and I didn't sustain any injury, but that really hurt my pride.
I was like the opposite. I was lying there, nobody was coming. I was like, "Hello, hello, I'm not moving." And then someone did come by who actually happened to be a first responder and physical therapist, and she said, "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. We were just kind of like staring at you, waiting to see if you would move."
Wow, wow,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. Well, this is really, really helpful. So my question is, and I
Mhm.
said I would come back to this. So let's say you don't have any aspirations of being a stand-up or going to an open mic, but you would like to be able to bring some humor, let's say, into the workplace or into your family or friends. Um, let's do the workplace because
Okay.
you've had you've had jobs,
Yes.
and actually, by the way, I did hear you speak about how I think it was in one of your comedy podcasts, how you like to go off by yourself for lunch, and you're saying, "Maybe I'm antisocial." You're an introvert. You are an introvert.
Ah,
So that's what, introverts need to go off by themselves to kind of recharge. So that's all that means. But what like how did you were you able to bridge these two parts of yourself? This guy who is always looking for funny things and likes to tell jokes to his family. How did you feel about bringing that into the workplace? Were you able to do that ever, or did you ever think about that?
Steve Martin, the great comedian Steve Martin, has a great quote that I love, and it's just always be thinking of the joke. And so, when you're in a workplace, it's not always appropriate to joke. You got to kind of gauge when it's appropriate. But if you're always thinking of the funny thing, and then you find the right time to say it, that can really work in the workplace. But like if you're given some sort of a presentation or something, I think there's lots of opportunities for humor, and people really appreciate that. Like if they're in a meeting, if you're giving like a PowerPoint presentation, I was thinking. I have just a few things here. Like if there's any way you can incorporate uh, a little movement, like maybe for some reason you have like maybe you're doing a PowerPoint presentation and then you have like a dance break in the middle of it, and then you just did start some little something like that. Like that would be kind of funny, and people would laugh. Like maybe you did 3 or 4 slides and then you had a dance break, and then you just something like that. I mean, that would be. I think dancing is always kind of funny. um, I was thinking kind of funny faces, like if you have some like example of what not to do in a PowerPoint presentation, and then you have like a picture of yourself doing the thing you're not supposed to do, or something. If you could find some way to incorporate like a funny picture of yourself in there, like it's a bunch of just text on the slide, and then you click to the next one, and you're going like that or something.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
what will happen if you touch the hot stove. Something like that. I don't know. I
Right,
mean,
or I was even thinking, like, if there's, charts of, like, financials and it looks really good, then maybe it could be, like, a picture, like
hey, yeah, you could take a picture of yourself and put it kind of in the bottom right corner of the screen of you going, hey, or no, bad. I think anything like that is good.
Mhm.
I have been getting into making little cartoons, and so you can use AI to make a cartoon for you, and just kind of have it say the funny thing you want it to say, and you can make it'll make little characters for you to use. That's kind of one way that I may and it would do it, would have just like a little funny kind of cartoon. um
What do you use for AI to make something like that? Do you have a
i
program or software?
I use a couple of different apps. Let's see, there's one called Imagine AI that's good. um the one I've most recently been using is it's called Color Pop AI, and it'll generate a like a black and white image, and then I used a different kind of color it in, and arrange it on a page, and then I'll put like the little text bubbles of what my characters are saying. But basically, you tell AI what to draw, and then it draws it basically. So like,
Mhm.
I want a podcaster with dark hair and a beard. Uh, and let's see what that looks like. And then you can regenerate. Like if you don't like that first image, it'll um, you can regenerate. I guess I should really encourage people to actually draw themselves more. But like I'm not a great drawer. I'm not. I'm also not so good at the speaking. The basic English is not so good.
Oh.
Um, I'm not the best artist, so I use AI tools to draw. Um, but yeah, that's one way to go. But yeah, I think any kind of dancing, funny faces, or cartoons that you could use.
Yeah, they're kind of like low-hanging fruit that you can do. Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah.
Uh,
But
so
but I wanna get back to you, like, did you have like, how did you personally feel? Like, did you ever feel like you brought some humor into your workplace and it wasn't taken well?
yes, almost as often as it was. I think it's just kind of knowing your audience and knowing what's appropriate to say, and um, when the right timing. But I mean, I've never been in a situation where I said something and somebody was like, "That was inappropriate. You shouldn't have said that." I've never been in
Mhm,
that situation, but I've
mhm,
definitely felt it. Like I've said, made a joke or something, later thought to myself, that really wasn't the right timing for me to say that. But
right.
um,
But you never got fired over it.
no, no, not yet. No. um, uh, I think it's hard to. I think you have to really try to get fired, but by saying something inappropriate. I think you've really got to try, because
Mhm.
I find sometimes, especially like working at different restaurants, some of the people you work with, like they will say the most inappropriate things that you've ever heard in your life, and you know what I mean. Probably what you're thinking is not nearly as bad as what they are saying. So um, I don't know. I would say if your humor style is typically a little more um explicit, I guess you could try to clean it up for the workplace.
Yeah, yeah, of
you know.
course. Of course.
Um, but yeah, I've never really had that situation where it was too much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So how do you come up with your funny things? Do you take notes? Like how does one start to see funny things around them?
I do take notes. I carry a small notebook with me, and you can also use your phone, but I like to go ahead and begin the writing process. So like, if I observe something funny, I'll just make a quick note of it, and then I'll come back later, and I'll usually try to expand it in like a larger notebook or on my laptop.
Oh,
And
is that your notepad there?
this is one of my several notepads that I have right now. And this is not jokes. This is just random thoughts in my head, basically. Got TV show ideas. I had a screenwriting seminar recently that I took some notes. I have, let's see, short film ideas, and then just like that's pretty much what this notebook is just supposed to be just random stuff basically.
Yeah,
But
kind of like a creative ideation. Yeah.
that's one thing I think a lot of people feel the need, like if they're in a creative space, to be really organized and get everything. I think it's almost more helpful to allow yourself to be kind of chaotic, and just have some form of organization. Like I've got several different notebooks, but like to have one for just going crazy, and just doing whatever. But yeah, usually I'll carry a little small notebook, which I don't have on me, of course, and it has just a little funny ideas that I think of. And to answer your question, how to see the humor around you, it's everywhere. I mean, everywhere you look, there's something funny somewhere. Somebody said or did something funny, or somebody. I I was on a film set a while back, and I was a background extra, and there was this. It was kind of a quiet set, like not too much chatter, and like the scene was really quiet, and so like they finished the scene, they're like cut, but it was still kind of quiet on the set, and nobody's really doing anything. Everybody's kind of being quiet, and then there was this big dude, this big guy walked by, and he's like, as he's walking by, he sneezed and just, achoo! Just loud, super loud sneeze. And I sat there and laughed for 5 or 6 minutes on the sneeze, and like, I mean, I don't know why I thought that was so funny. I think it was just that it was so loud and at the most inappropriate time, when everybody's been really quiet. So like stuff like that makes no sense. Like if you can find some way to twist that and turn it into a joke, or that could even be a funny story, like with a little work. But that's just an example of something funny that I kind of picked up on. You know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, what this kind of brings to my mind as I hear you speak about this is the element of surprise and contrast.
Hmm.
So maybe if we train ourselves to see things that surprise us
Yes.
or that create a big contrast of energy or, just like there's a certain mood, like let's say in a library, and
Yeah.
then there or and then there's something else that goes on. Like it's so hard for kids to come into a library and know that it's hush hush time
Right.
or and the things that they may say. Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about how to open up our awareness in order to take this in. And maybe it's also like being reminded in the morning to pay attention to those things today, because otherwise we just go back to our default way of looking at the world. And what we're talking about here is how to open up our observation so that we can see the world with with more possibilities.
Mhm.
I'm very
Right.
curious about this, and I would love for you to, continue to think about it too. So maybe, we might circle back at some point and say, "Oh, I've been thinking about how to find the funny." And um this other thing came to mind because I
That's
think, I think it's such an interesting challenge.
It's kind of, I mean, I think of it kind of like, the movie Karate Kid. They're like
Yeah.
karate is everything. Karate isn't everything. Comedy isn't everything too. Comedy is it's just like karate.
Well,
It's like
so
everywhere you look.
intellectually I get that, but like how do we like if we've been always a very serious person because we've been following the rules and trying to fit in and not, upset the boat. Comedy is all about disruption. And
Yes,
the mindset shift and the awareness shift is going to have to mm, break through or open up to a new like turn of the prism or the kaleidoscope.
right. And that like that story about the guy like sneezing, right? There should be a big build up to his sneezing. It should really be more of a it's
Mm.
a quiet set. It was, the director was telling everybody to be quiet, and then all of a sudden, achoo! Just the loudest. That's
And
to me,
yeah,
that's the equivalent of like falling off the hammock. Like
right.
that's the moment of falling off the hammock.
Okay, so that
Um,
gives me ideas of like the buildup for it.
yeah. Oh, for the hammock story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, like you say, I've had a stressful week. It's been phone's been ringing constantly. I just want to take a minute to go outside and read my book, maybe 30 minutes to chill. And I lay down on the hammock, and immediately the
Boom.
hammock doesn't like me. The hammock flips me out.
It spit me out.
Spit me out. Yeah, there it is. Hammock spit me out. That's another one of those hyperbole, like,
Mhm.
yeah, or forcing an inanimate object to become alive. The hammock spit you
Mm.
out. I forget the word for that. I'm really showing my education here by forgetting words and
That's cool. I really appreciate that because I feel like one of the things that I like to teach about is that we don't always have to have the right answer. We don't always have to be worried about, having the perfect thing to say, that we can honor the it's kind of like the plan B of word recall. We don't have to even rather than get stuck on that perfect word we can't think of, let's find a substitute or describe it. And in fact, in that description and in that roundabout way, we might find something delightful.
That's well, I was gonna say that's kind of a way to find the funny sometimes is if you say things in a strange way. Like I heard a comedian, I can't remember who said it. It was a comedian recently said that a comic says funny things. A comedian says things funny. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
interesting.
a
Yeah,
comedian it
very
was
interesting.
I'm trying to remember exactly. I can't remember who said it, but yeah, that's kind of the skill of a comedian if you can find a way to say things in a way that's not normal. So if you're a person who naturally speaks in a way that's kind of unusual, you'd probably make a great stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think it's important to practice letting things fall out of our mouth. I used to run a class called Think on Your Feet, where we did a lot of different improv exercises. And I believe I don't believe in pushing people outside their comfort zone unless they're already inside a comfort zone. So like the more comfortable and safe people feel, I believe, and I know this for myself, I'm willing to take more risks and try things out and do and be silly and do things that I wouldn't necessarily do in a higher stakes environment. So I believe in practicing in a closed space where it feels safe. But I think there is something about like expanding our ability to let things just fly and not be concerned with how good they are, but
right,
just let them like just experience. Like, for instance, so I'm a musician in my background and did a lot of improvisation, and I saw this study of improv, really great improvisers, and some guy put them into, put diodes on their head, electrodes, I mean, to measure what's going on in their brain. And they came up with they noticed there was a part of the brain that was unactivated or was shut off. And it was the part of the brain that is judgmental or inhibiting. So it was a part of the prefrontal cortex that kind of saves the ego. And without that constant like second guessing that we tend to do, like, oh, is this going to be good? Is this going to be okay? Is it going to be right? What's going to happen to me? All that is kind of shut off so that the improviser is free to just play around with notes and rhythms and whatever. And if something happens unexpected, that actually becomes part of the material that gets improvised with.
oh wow,
Which,
okay,
and I'm sure that happens not with, improv, stand-up improv, not comedy, but, where people are playing with just ideas and seeing what happens. And the whole premise of, or one of the rules of improv is yes and, meaning that if something comes up, you add to it rather than you deflect it.
right, right. I've done a little bit of improv. I've always enjoyed like an improv game, so like that's the type of thing that I would really love to be a part of to do.
Okay,
Um,
so here's a challenge. I
okay,
challenge you to consider sometime in the next year
okay.
to dabble a little bit in improv, and I promise to at least go to an open mic and pull together some kind of a comedy bit, 5-minute thing.
Okay.
All right? Is that a
All right.
deal?
That sounds like a deal. That sounds like
Okay.
a deal.
Okay. So this I don't know if there's anything else that you want to say to our audience, but I think we should be wrapping up.
Okay. Well, I just say if your audience wouldn't mind checking out my podcast, it's the Blake Green Comedy Podcast. You can find it at blakegreencomedy.com. And Linda, it's been great talking to you.
It's been really, really great to have you. I've totally enjoyed this. I feel inspired. I feel like I feel challenged as I have just kind of created this challenge, from the show. And I know that uh, I'm going to be bringing in more funny to my talks. And I hope that anyone who's listening feels equally inspired to do that for themselves as well. So thank you so much for coming on. And you can find Blake Green everywhere on social media. Just do Blake Green everywhere and you'll find his YouTube, you'll find his Facebook, you'll find his Instagram. And until next time, I'm wishing you delight in the limelight.
Thank you so much.